That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so very much, President Higgins. That was, I feel, a perfect framing for us all to think about the issues that we are going to be discussing here today. Community is not something that necessarily happens spontaneously. It needs to be nurtured. And the President has mentioned things like participative decision making and the tension between community and commercialisation and the maximisation of profit, the tension between the individual and the collective. And this is the perfect context for us to now move into our next segment, which is about the People's Transition Project. It's a pilot project that was launched by TASC in 2020, and it described a model for participative decision making, for participative climate action to enable local development. It's about giving people and communities ownership over the transition to a zero carbon society. It's about enhancing public support by tackling inequality, by raising the standards of living, through the delivery of climate solutions. So this really is a very innovative project. It's the perfect action that we need to see. And here to tell us about this project, I'd like to welcome Seán McCabe. Seán is a very committed and inspiring individual who has been working. He's worked with the Mary Robinson Foundation for Climate Justice for 5 years. He's been doing advocacy and action around social change for a long time. And he's now working with TASC, and he is the executive manager for TASC Climate Justice Centre, and he's organised today's event, participated in the organisation anyway. I know there's been lots of people. So please can we welcome Seán McCabe to tell us about the People's Transition Project, please.
Thank you, Anya. Good President, for joining us here today, and Mrs. Higgins. I'm not going to spend too long here because we have some really nice panels and speakers to listen to, but I would like to just give you a little bit of insight into the People's Transition Project that we've been running in Phibsborough. Some would say maybe at breakneck speed, but the urgency of the crisis requires it. Alan, if you don't mind, we might just go to the first slide. Alan has kindly volunteered to change slides for me, even though it wasn't in his remit at all. Next one, please. And we might just go to the next one straight away. So just quickly, what we're going to discuss today, the background, what the People's Transition is about, why it's important, why we believe it's important at TASC, and then the project itself, which has been supported by AIB here in Phibsborough, and it mirrored a similar project in Ardra in County Donegal. So we're just going to run through the findings of that project, and then finally just talk a little bit about next steps and maybe how you might be able to input into the project at this stage before it concludes. So Alan, next slide, thank you. Just quickly to say, because this happened last night, we're here to talk about participation. And last night at the COP26 in Glasgow, a group of rather conservative countries, including Saudi Arabia and the US, looked to remove human rights language specifically around the right to participation from an article about participation. So really cynical stuff. Thankfully, the Human Rights and Climate Change Working Group, who are active around this issue, managed to rally Mexico and Argentina and a number of other countries, and eventually Switzerland and Europe came on board as well, and the language was hopefully saved. It's not clear yet. But the photo on the left is just to say, I've never seen a more fortified COP. And the more you exclude people, the bigger you have to build fences. And this is not the direction we want to be travelling in. So that's why we're chatting today. So next slide, please, Alan. So the starting point. Just to give you some background on the People's Transition, we decided we needed a model for as Anya said, for climate action that was really about empowering people, and not only empowering people, but putting the assets of change into their hands so that they could profit from the transition, that they would benefit tangibly, and it would cause an increase in demand. Alan, if you wouldn't mind, next slide. So it looks something like this. It was founded on 3 core assumptions. The first is that we have to move faster than public support will build. The crisis is so great that if our leaders wait for the public support to be in place, we're goosed. So the solution to that is to proactively build support as you roll out climate action. And so that's the second piece of this. We need to proactively build support. So thirdly, you do that. People, and we've actually just substantiated this with a survey released last week, but people in Ireland have far more pressing priorities than climate change in their day-to-day life. So the way you address climate change is you deal with their immediate priorities in a way that is climate smart and inclusive. And we're trying to create this virtual cycle on the left-hand side of participation, the valuing of local knowledge, and the co-creation and co-ownership of solutions. We can go into it in more detail later. Alan, next slide if you don't mind. This was the outcome we were aiming for. A blueprint for one or more solutions that could be implemented here in Phibsborough that would be both climate smart and would give local wealth building opportunities to the community. We said they would not duplicate existing efforts, and we committed to trying to make them complementary, holistic, costed and implementable. And I think we've gotten quite close in the 7 months that we've been working on this. Next slide, Alan, if you don't mind. Next one again. So you may have seen this coming in. It's on your desks. This is the outcome of the People's Transition. Just to explain how we rolled out the project really quickly, we had a mapping phase, a listening phase, and a solutions phase. The mapping phase was looking at all available census data and other data that we had to hand and understanding just who is in the community of Phibsborough. Because, you know, oftentimes you can think you can know a community, but there's a lot of hidden people within a community, and you have to make sure that you hear them and you understand them and you listen to them. So that informed how we did our listening phase. We listened to people who maybe typically didn't get included in the conversation. Of all the people we spoke to, 99% said change was needed, so that's an indicator that we do need to act. And then we took what we had heard from the listening phase and built it into the solutions. So just really quickly, next slide there, Alan, if you don't mind. What we found in the mapping phase was that the majority of people in Phibsborough are renters, that there was a high concentration of potential anchor institutions. These are organisations like the Mater Hospital or Mountjoy or others, which could play a role as community wealth builders within the community. Obviously a large concentration of youth and a great diversity to the community, which actually, if you look around here, I guess we're not doing great at tapping into that diversity. Next slide, Alan, if you don't mind. The listening phase told us a lot about people living in precarity, people frustrated with congestion and traffic and dangerous roads, people feeling that the development in the area was mostly developer-led and not community-led. And then there were other issues too that, you know, were mostly interconnected. And we will have a report out at the end of the month that will detail this in more. We'll give you more information on it, but these were the key points that we heard. The points in blue were the ones we said, hey, let's try to address these points with the solutions that we build. The points in grey, we admit that, you know, there are issues and we heard about them, but we can't necessarily do something about them at this moment in time. Next slide there, please, Alan. And the solutions, and again, the report will go into this in more detail, but we're proposing 2 cooperatives, and as the President said, you know, cooperatives could play a key role, will play a key role if we're to survive the climate crisis. So we're proposing a cooperative retrofitting operation and a bike cooperative for last mile delivery in Phibsborough. Both would have a significant impact in terms of climate action. In terms of delivery, last mile delivery takes about 20% of all emissions out. If that moves from being in vans to being on bikes, that's about 20% of all emissions taken out of the delivery supply chain. And also, similarly, you know, we have a massive issue in terms of energy efficiency for retrofitting, which will help lower our energy demands, etc. But there's a whole array of other benefits which you can see on those sheets in front of you, which will come into this if we're successful. So, Alan, next slide. Thank you very much. Next one again. So this is, we'll have the panel now, but basically what we want to say is next steps. The if we're successful is a pretty big if, and it relies a lot on agency within a community, and there is incredible agency in this community, I know that for a fact. But what we're going to do is finalise these reports. We'd love you to take away those ideas, the sheets that you have, and come to us, either myself or Susie, with any ideas you may have on how those solutions could be refined further, etc. They will all be incorporated in the final report by the end of the month. And then the point from here is we will hopefully have a blueprint. And at TASC, we can't really deliver that blueprint. It's only like, there's 6 of us. So it's about handing it over to the community. It's about identifying where there might be resources, where there might be, and some of these will be identified in the report, some we mightn't realise and people might come forward with them. But it's about handing it over, and hopefully people can see themselves in it, see their own future in it, and take it on board and run with it if possible. So that's the People's Transition, that's the project, and I think we're going to just go straight into the panel.